Quiet! Of course, I hit record, they start barking. But anyways, hello, precious people, and welcome to my channel. I am Jacqueline Parks, just ignore them little puppies, and I'm going to be showing you how to follow along to a Paul Clark tutorial that he just uploaded on Wednesday, and show you how super easy it is. And he explains everything so easy, so go check out his video wherever it's posted. If I can put a link on the screen somewhere, I don't know. I'm not too tech savvy, so maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. You have to probably search him out. But anyways, I really enjoy his tutorials, and that's how I learned, was watching YouTube. So let's get started. Here I am giving a quick little sketch to the scene I'm going to be painting, which is based off a Paul Clark tutorial of a beach in Ibiza, I believe it's pronounced. Anyways, someday I'll probably be there in person, hopefully, and taking a class from him in person. But until then, all I have is YouTube video tutorials, which at the end of this, you'll be able to see if it was a good tutorial based on how well my painting turned out. So right now I am putting in some Viridian green into the wash that I put on the paper. And by the way, I'm using arches for this. I really believe that when you're painting a painting that you want to last and be able to hang on a wall, that you should use the best quality supplies that you can afford. So Arches is one of the more expensive brands that I use and reserve for special paintings. If I'm just practicing and doing little cards that I might be giving away, I don't really worry too much about which brand I use. But you can see one of my other videos on my channel that kind of goes over the differences in two different economical brands of watercolor paper that you can find at your local craft store. So here I am just putting in some of the trees and dry brush effect, and getting those laid out, the green color just laid out there. And I know in Paul's tutorial he uses blue and yellow to mix his greens. I like cheating and using, I think it's a sap green, straight from the tube. The brand of paints that I started off with was like a $10 brand of just pan paints, but as I've used them up, I've replaced the pan with a tube paint. And so now over here on the left is some rocks, and in Paul's tutorial he uses a credit card or some kind of card to scrape into the wet paint. And you'll see as I zoom in on this area, I'll show you how I'm not too successful at first. It's not even making a difference. So I was trying to figure out, why is that the case? And I think what happened with a little experimenting is that I either didn't wait long enough for the paint to settle into the paper, or I didn't have enough paint on that section. So you can see that I actually mix up some Payne's Gray with, I think it's burnt umber, and just dab it in there and let it kind of soak in to the paper. And then I will give it another shot with the credit card, and you'll see that I have a little better results now. And yeah, don't mind that little piece of hair in there. I'm pretty sure I get it out of there at some point. But yeah, you can see that now I'm kind of getting the effect that Paul shows in his tutorial, which I hope you go and check it out. It's a really good tutorial on how to do all this. It's great to see his whole trip, and if you guys are in Europe, you can probably be able to book a trip with him and one of his excursions much more cheaply than I could here in the US. So now I'm going back to mixing in some of that green, just darkening those trees. And I really like working in sections, which is why I love following Paul Clark, because he shows how you can work on a painting in sections. So like this guy, you wet that, you work on that, done. You do the water, you wet that, you work on that, done. The rocks, you wet that, you work on that, done. So for me, that breaks it down into much more manageable steps. And this actually is a painting size that's a little bigger than what I normally do. I like 8 by 10 and smaller, just to give myself more control over what's going on and not be overwhelmed. When I first started doing watercolor in my 20s, and I probably blocked it out because I was not that good at it. I did take a class, and they had us wet like a 23 by 42 size piece of watercolor paper, which is just overwhelming. And the whole thing, just wet the whole thing and start painting on it. It's like, what? I can't make anything appear on this because it just bleeds all over the place. So for me, I think it was just too frustrating, and I ended up putting all the supplies I got from that class in a closet and forgetting about them. Well, fast forward to 2020, and I started to want to get into watercolor. My sister's the one who kind of pushed me to do so, because she wanted me to paint her a mermaid, which was a watercolor. You know, the example she sent me was a watercolor. And I said, I don't do watercolor, you know that. She said, you'll figure it out. So here I was, stuck with trying to figure out how to paint this mermaid for my sister, which she ended up really loving in the end. If I can try and find a picture of it, I'll post it at the end of this video, so you can see how it turned out. But really, I enjoyed the process so much better, because what I ended up doing was going to YouTube, which YouTube has millions of videos, but for some reason the algorithm put Paul Clark in front of me, so I'm very grateful for that, and was able to learn basic techniques and not be so frustrated with the whole process. And that's when I fell in love with watercolor. And as you can see, my rocks are turning out pretty good, and I do like that little scrapey technique. It's pretty fun, but sometimes you just gotta experiment, and I think that's the key to doing most of this, is you need to experiment. I always tell my students in person that what we're doing is having fun. So if it's not fun, try a different technique or try a different way of doing it. I have one student who does really beautiful flowers, and she's always saying that she likes the loose technique that I do, but that she doesn't like it when she does it. And sometimes I see artwork out there that I just am in awe of, and I wish I could paint like that, but I can't. So I understand that, you know, I may be able to appreciate what someone else, an artist, does that I cannot duplicate, but that doesn't mean that what I create's not worthwhile. And when I can tell you right now that I do enjoy painting, I do enjoy the process now, because I have more control and I enjoy it. And I think right now I'm using a mix of some blues and that Verdian green and maybe a little bit of Payne's Gray. If y'all don't have Payne's Gray, I highly recommend it. I scooped out all the black in this pan set and just refilled it with Payne's Gray. And that's pretty much my go-to color now to darken anything, pretty much. And I try not to start with a super clean palette, just because I like how colors mix together. And you might be tempted, like I've been tempted recently, to buy a tube paint that's like turquoise blue. And I was looking online and I found one that I really was just in awe of the color. It was like this light bluish, pale turquoise, and it's just so pretty, and I'm like, this is what I need. But the price was $20 for a little tube of paint. And I'm thinking, do I need this? So, kind of hemmed and hawed. It was in my cart. And then I was Googling some more things, and the same brand of paint has like a 5-color set, beginner set, for $35. So I was like, you know what? Let me try the set of the 5 different colors. They're kind of primary colors, and it does come with a Payne's Gray. So I was kind of like, yeah, let's try this and see if I even like this brand, because it's not Winsor & Newton. It's called, I'll have to look that up and I'll text it on the screen. But it's definitely, it's an Italian brand, and someone in the group on Facebook had recommended it, and it looks so pretty, so I really want to try it, and I'm planning to make a video on that. So make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can be updated when I update my channel. So right now I am finishing some reflections in the water. I really love doing that. And you can't really, you can't match anyone else's brush stroke for brush stroke, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have a different hold on your brush. You're going to have a different style. And the more you do this, the more you'll understand how that all works. But practice, practice, practice. And for me, when I would paint in acrylic, I could do phenomenally realistic ocean water. And I'm getting better with the watercolor paints, and I really feel like God is guiding my hand a lot of the time to help me put some brush strokes down. And as you can see, I am just like skimming through all this, and I know the video is speeded up, but like Paul took 3 hours to paint his painting, and I took an hour and a half, which for me is actually a long time to paint a painting. I usually go much faster, especially following along his tutorial, because his are speeded up, so I try to keep up with the video, and of course I'm going frantically a mile a minute trying to paint and keep up. But right here I'm just kind of letting my hand just go wherever and filling in some little gaps here and there, adding layer on layer. This is something also you need to remember about watercoloring, is that it's not like acrylic where you just paint and let the first brush stroke down be the final. Watercolor is much different than that. You have to build up layers. So for the rocks, I think I did like 3 layers on those rocks. I'm trying to remember. The water, probably 4 or 5 layers are involved with the painting. And another thing is you don't use white. Like you'll see in a little bit where I bring out some pastels, and that can add a little highlight on top of watercolor paper. And watercolor, like the darker spots can be brought back, and the lighter highlights can be brought forward. So that's one technique to create some depth on your painting. You don't want a flat 1 dimension, 2 dimension. You really want to try and get some depth into your painting by adding different hues and different tones. So for me, it's like you gotta take a step back sometimes and just look at the whole thing and see what it needs, see what it's missing. A lot of times I take a picture with my phone and look at it on my phone, because then my eye is more judging, like critiquing it, and I can tell, okay, well, this part looks too flat, this part looks too monotone, and I need to add something to it. And so and now we're doing the little people in the water and on the beach, and I think I fuss with them quite a bit. I add a lot of color, then I lift it off, and I add more color, and then I lift that off. So I kind of painted them like 3 or 4 times, but it's okay because they're really just little blobs, and your mind can obviously acknowledge that they are people. So you really shouldn't fuss with it as much as I did, but sometimes I'm not perfect. I just keep trying. And another thing that you'll notice is the paint brushes that I'm using are, I think it's called Black Velvet Silver Edition. They're a travel set. And my friend actually showed me that they come apart and the brush tip fits right inside the handle, so you can travel with them and your tips don't get bent. But I do actually have a really pretty case with turtles on it, made out of some fabric that a friend of mine created and sewed for me. I'm not a good sewer. I've tried it before. I've made some different projects, but it's not my passion. I don't enjoy dealing with a sewing machine or needles or thread, really. But I am in awe of those who do. And so my friend made me a little paintbrush holder that is really pretty with turtles on it. And since I love turtles, and so that's where I keep all my paintbrushes. So this particular set, which I could probably link in the description on Amazon, my husband got for me for Christmas one year because they're just really expensive. And I think when he bought it for me, which was like 3 years ago, they were like $75. And now I just looked the other day and it's $122 for the same set. And I guess it's just going to keep going up. I don't know. But they are really good. And I think there's another set you can get that's not travel that might be not as expensive. But they're really good brushes, and they hold a lot of paint. And you don't have to keep re-dipping it in your paints and doing a bunch of back and forth. And the bristles are soft enough to get a good effect with wet on wet, and also stiff enough to do dry on wet, or wet on dry, I should say. So yes, and I really enjoy them. And a friend of mine just bought them too, and she's loving them. So if you can, invest in them. Otherwise, just get a fairly inexpensive set from your local craft store that's made for watercolor. Sometimes they say watercolor and acrylic, and I think those are a little stiffer. But I did find a really good one at Michael's. It had like turquoise handles, and it came with like 5 paintbrushes for like $12. And it had a flat, it had a mop, it had an angled brush, and it had 2 size round brushes in it. I can't remember the sizes, to be honest. Maybe I can put them in the description for you, but I would say just to get started, if you're a beginner, just get something inexpensive and see if this is something you really like doing before you start investing hundreds of dollars into it. For most people, they want to try a hobby and see if they like it, and maybe after a couple weeks they're like, it's not for me. Just like the first time I tried watercoloring, and I put hundreds of dollars into doing that class and buying all the materials and everything, and I ended up not enjoying it at all. So I put everything away and didn't touch it for 20 years. Maybe even more than that, probably 25. Ooh, giving away my age. Anyways, so here are some Stampin' Up! Pastels that I have, and I'm not sure which ones Paul Clark used. Obviously, I don't know if he knows anything about Stampin' Up!, but I've been a demonstrator for 15 years, and I have a ton of supplies, stamps, ink, cardstock, and watercolor pencils. And one of the products that Stampin' Up! Makes is these assorted pastels. And I'm really glad that I hung on to these, and I could add some little highlights here and there. trying to bring forward that branch that's hanging overhead, the roof on that little building, and some of the people. If you really want to add some bright highlights, get a white gel pen. So this is a white gel pen. I think it comes in a 3-pack from Michael's, and I think for $10. So it's not really expensive. You just add a few little dots of white gel, and if it's too bright, you can dab it with your finger and just use it sparingly. You don't want to make a whole bunch. I got it mostly to do whiskers of animals when I do pet portraits, but it's also really good if you didn't leave enough white space, because the paper is supposed to be your whites, kind of like the clouds in the background are not white paint at all. I painted that whole sky with just blue, like cerulean blue, and then dabbed out the paint with a paper towel. So here I'm just adding a little bit more. And there you have it. I put my little signature in the bottom. I like to put my initials with the date, and I just encourage you all to give it a go, as Paul Clark would say. And thank you again for watching.